When you go into the program, you're supposed to be hiding.
Hmm.
So in 1992, my son graduated college and he came to stay with me in LA for a while. And one day I said, hey, you know what? Let's go out to the desert, Palmdale area. Henry is out there and he invited us out to have dinner on Sunday. He goes, Dad, you mean Henry Hill? I go, yeah, Henry from Goodfellas. We drive out there and we spend the day out there with him. And of course, my son was like on the way back home, he's like, wow. He just didn't look like, the Henry Hill in the movie. Because Henry was small, he was kind of scrawny, he was dried up alcoholic drug user, and you kind of felt sorry for him that his life was isolated out there on the desert.
Yeah.
And when my kids saw him when we drove back to LA, my kid says, Dad, after I saw Goodfellas, I thought this guy was bigger than life. I go, well, people should know that leaving the mob is not exciting.
Welcome back to A Lifetime of Mafia Tales. Today's episode is never-before-seen footage for all of our YouTube listeners. These 3 clips were exclusively for Patreon subscribers only, but unfortunately Sal was pretty sick, so we didn't get to record our weekly episode that we usually do. The first clip about to play is about a good fellow by the name of Jimmy Burke. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel for more videos like this. Also, please be sure to subscribe to our Patreon channel for exclusive videos like the ones you're going to watch today. And without further ado, let's get into this first clip.
I remember in 1978 when I had my Corvette shop. In one building, I had a Corvette shop, and a block away, I had a chop shop operation. And I was pretty much conditioned in those days to listen to a guy like Jimmy Burke, who recommended his son steal cars for me. This is the way it worked in the 70s. Fathers would get their sons involved because I'm not sure whether they thought it was a great life, the fathers, or maybe it was just expected that you'll follow your father, in a life of crime. And Frankie was a nice kid. He was, I don't remember him using drugs, but I think the year that he stole cars from me was the year that his father got out of prison. Of course, a lot happened quickly. He started stealing cars for me like in the fall of 78. By the time January came, they had already pulled off the Lufthansa heist. And, Frankie was not the type of kid to talk about what was going on inside his family with his father, his mother, and whatever. Everybody kept things pretty secretive in those days. If he was stealing cars, that's all he and I talked about. We didn't talk about anything else. We didn't talk about drugs. We didn't talk about heists. And he was raised with Tommy. So he knew the wild and crazy Tommy. Did Frankie know that Tommy was going to get whacked, a month or so after the heist? Probably not. I mean, he was just 18 years old, when that all took place. So, Jimmy was trying to keep things together. I mean, I guess he realized the pressure that came from that huge heist, that guys were going to flip. And he started taking out some of these guys before they could flip. I mean, there was a mention of a girl named Teresa Ferrara that was murdered. If you look close into Henry's book or into whatever was written about Jimmy, and that was one of Tommy's girlfriends or something. He was involved with this girl, Teresa Ferrara, and she probably had information and she was passing it on to the authorities. So I don't remember if her body was found, but all the stuff started to add up. And I just think that Jimmy was trying to cover his tracks, man, and did a lot of killings. I mean, he hung out in a little bar just 2 blocks from my house, and I would go into that bar every once in a while. And it was flooded with criminals, and that's the way it was, the way they played it in the movie Goodfellas. Across the street from the bar was Dominic Cataldo's restaurant. That's how tight everything was. And I was 3 blocks away from there with my deli that I owned. So there was a lot going on in that neighborhood at the time.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, there is certain guys that bring their sons in. I mean, Anthony Ruggiano, his father brought him. I mean, he wanted to be that, but I mean, for the fathers allowing it. I mean,
Right.
John Gotti, he brought his son in. I mean, you think about, there's got to be more. There's definitely got to be way more that, of other guys. But I mean, for you, that's something that you never wanted for your
No.
sons or anything like that, which is definitely a good thing, obviously, because I mean, Frankie Burke, you talk about him. I mean, he died. I mean, he was murdered, I believe, and
Right.
they suspected that he was involved with dealing drugs. I
Right.
mean, what do you do any research in on that?
No, I mean, a lot of that stuff that gets written, I don't pay a lot of attention to it because most of the people who write that are reporters. They go and they get, law enforcement reports. They're never there firsthand. And that's probably one of the reasons why I'm doing some of this stuff because I lived it. And people will write all kinds of stuff that they're not really privileged to know. And the stuff that I talk about is 99 and 44/100ths truth and accurate. And there's people that put stuff up on, even on this, when we do these interviews, they want to critique it. They might be 30, 35, 40. And where do they get their information? I mean, look, you're 24 years old. You've got to read a lot of stuff to get information on what happened 50 years ago. Because I
Absolutely.
hadn't thought about it, but it is pop culture. This whole
Yeah.
mob thing is pop culture.
Yeah, and that's what I've been doing with all of our guests, or not guests, but in particular the topics of guys that we talk about. I
Right.
read the book about Henry Hill. I read
Yeah.
Charles Carneglia, John Gotti, the Gotti's boys, Gotti rules, whatever it was. I mean, now I'm reading Frank Lucas's book. So I mean, all these topics and
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, of course, I was not there, but I want to talk about it with you and make sure whatever I report and read on these interviews. I mean, you could come in and say, well, that kind of sounds like bullshit or not, but like you said, you were there, and that's who
Yeah.
you were around, Frankie.
Yeah. And I, it's just like a car accident that happens on four corners. Everybody standing there has a different point of view. And so I had a point of view from my perspective about what happened to Jimmy. And, I mean, they had a whole family. Mickey was his wife, and Kathy was his daughter, and Frankie and Jesse, that was his family. So they all knew who Dad was. He was a criminal, and they respected him. They admired him for being that criminal.
Yeah, I mean, especially when they think about from the books that I've read about kids that had their father in the mob, they always looked at it as their father providing for them. Same thing with their
Right.
wife. They don't really know about it until maybe after they're dead or whatnot, but they start getting little bits and pieces, as they're growing up, and then they always think about it like that, and that's just what it is, I guess. I mean, in a way, it is, but at the same time, it's definitely not the way you want to provide for your family and get money, right?
Yeah. And children of criminals, about 2 or 3 years ago, I said to my son, my oldest son, we did the Sins of the Father book came out in 89. Sinatra Club came out 2012. And I said to him one day, there's more. There's a whole bunch more that I would like to convey, because mostly about the change that I went through. And then one day he called me. He said, I've been thinking, Dad, about another book you're going to do. Is there some stuff that you're going to talk about that we never heard? I said, look, I just want to tell you, I came close, but I never killed anybody. So there's no skeleton in the closet about me committing murders. I never hurt women. I never hurt children. I had a line. I had a strange line. And that line followed me. There was things I was going to do and things I would never do when I went over to the other side with the government. And I stood with that line.
Yeah, well, at least you had some kind of moral compass on
Right.
what you wanted to do and what you didn't want
Exactly.
to do.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these guys, I mean, you could have easily been involved with it. I mean, you almost did the hit with Joe Messina and Tutti Francis and Dominic
Right.
Cataldo, but
Right.
for whatever reasons, it didn't happen. It happened at a
Right.
different time, and you weren't involved with it. So,
Right.
I mean, whatever the case may be, I mean, here we are today talking about all
Yeah.
these stories and stuff, and
Yeah.
doing a lot of good videos and stuff. People are enjoying them, and I mean, for our Patreon people watching this right now, we do appreciate it. Our Patreon channel starting to grow, and you guys are asking some really good questions. If you guys have any other questions or anything you want to ask Sal, please comment on this video or even on the chat on Patreon where Sal's been getting back with everyone. I mean, what are your thoughts on all these comments, Sal?
Oh, there's so many of them. It's hard to read them all. And everybody has their own idea about a question. They want firsthand information. The way it to be answered. So,
Yeah.
somebody sends me 10 or 15 questions, I'll just answer one and leave it at that. And they can figure out, do more research, try to find credible stories. I mean, you got to remember when people create stories, they're trying to get interest, whether it's, online or a book or whatever. So I just try to do the best I can with the memory. Remember, most of this stuff is already 50 years ago.
That's
It's a
insane.
long time. Yeah.
That's double as at my age, man.
Yeah.
I'm 23, so
Yeah.
that's, so I mean that is interesting that you can recall this from back then.
Yeah.
But I mean, you lived it for a number of your life, so I mean that's just what it is. And anybody got any questions, feel free to ask Sal. And just look out. We're going to continue to drop stuff exclusively for you. We're going to be doing those. We posted that picture of John Gotti, and Sal put a couple sentences about him, and we're going to do more of those. Just give people a little more content on here. So please share our videos or our Patreon channel if you think anyone else will enjoy it, and we look forward to hearing from everyone. Now we're switching over to the second clip. Again, this is never before seen videos for all of our YouTube listeners. In this clip, Sal takes us back to New York City when he was putting in work with the Mafia. Sal shares his experiences with Charles Carneglia. Today, me and Sal are going to do an exclusive video about Charles Carneglia. We just posted the video on YouTube, and now we're going to go on here and talk about a story that can't really be on YouTube. So this is exclusive for you guys. So let's hear it, Sal. What do you got?
I met Charles in the 70s at the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club, and I didn't pay much attention to him. Later on, I guess maybe 5 years later, I found out he was really good with cars and locks, and asked him to make a key for a car, so I could do a heist of a guy's jewelry. And, he got that done. That was cool. But I never really paid much attention to what he was doing behind the scenes. And what bothered me was years later, we're talking like, okay, that was 1976. I did that little jewelry heist. Over 20 years later, when law enforcement came to me, visiting me while I was in the witness protection program, they told me how sick he was. And I really didn't know how, demented the guy was. He was hurting women. And I gave them information. And little did I know, one of the women that I gave them a name about, they went and searched her out and got witnesses, and eventually they convicted him of murder. I mean, I was disappointed that a lot of Italian guys I knew, they didn't hurt women and children, but John Gotti liked him because he probably used him to dispose of bodies. And when I read about it, I was, oh my gosh, because I used to go to that junkyard, the Fountain Auto Parts. I had no idea what he was doing there. But again, life was so secretive within the secret. And I'm sure he was, cutting people's bodies up. And it was reported he kept little trophy parts from them. So that always bothered me. I just didn't ever have any interest in hurting innocent people. That was my point of view. But he turned out to be a sicko.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Little do you know with any of these kind of people, because
yeah,
we would, little did you know, you would make a whole series about all these people that you'd find out,
Right.
after the fact, some of them and stuff. But I mean, even like Roy DeMeo, you didn't even know what was going on with him when you were doing business
you
with
deal
him.
with these guys on one level. You don't know what they're doing. It's just like the guys that I knew that I was dealing with stolen car parts and all that. They had no idea I was dealing heroin.
True.
So everybody has a secret part of their life, and they don't share it with everybody else that they're doing business with. Just because you're, dealing stolen merchandise, you're not going to tell somebody, oh, I'm selling heroin. So life was like layers of secrecy, and I always thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it really is, because you don't think about it like that, and
right.
until after the fact, I guess, when you're out of the life. But
Yeah.
I mean, now people know that that's out there and that there's different levels to different people, because that's true. Why would like Charles tell you, hey, I'm doing all this, or Roy DeMeo, hey, well, I'm doing this? I mean, there's no reason
Right.
to. You're just gonna get in trouble. So I
Right.
mean, they eventually did, but no matter, they both got convicted on something, and Roy, he ended up getting killed. So it's treacherous, man. I mean, this is something you don't want to be involved with. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, there's nothing glamorous and glorious about living in the mob life. People looked at movies like The Godfather, they thought it was glamour. Yes, it is a piece of history and we can't change it. But when I finally got away from it, I shook my head. I never wanted my kids involved with any of that stuff, and they weren't. So that was my position. I was motivated. It took me a long time to figure out. I was motivated more by the chase than the prize. So once I realized that, you could be creative in the world of business, and that was the same type of feeling about a chase. Like I was buying and selling in Los Angeles for years, legitimately, and making money, and I had fun with it. So I realized I should have did that when I was in my 20s. I didn't have to wait till I was in my 50s.
No, I mean that is true because a lot of these mob guys, they could have been anything, but I think
Right,
in your case and a lot of these other guys' cases,
right.
it was just the adrenaline, the feel for doing something illegal, and like I mean, you look at Michael Francis. I mean, he's a very smart guy. I mean, he could have been doing this for years, his show and stuff. I mean, in a legit way, but it's like you know what he was on that criminal side. He grew up in it, and that's probably
Yeah,
maybe he had the thrill of it. Maybe he had that thing too. But another smart guy. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are out now. A couple guys really that do shows and stuff. I mean, they're really smart. I mean, they could have. I mean, they're capos. They were capos.
yeah,
So they were just on a whole nother intellectual boss level. So it's like
yeah.
they could have been a lot, man. Just like you, you could have been. I mean, you still did end up because you didn't spend your whole life in the mafia.
No,
After the fact, you had. I mean, you've been out of it for 40 plus years. You were in the mafia for how many years?
15 years, and I spent 20 years in Hollywood.
Yeah, so I mean,
So,
look what happened.
yeah,
A lot
yeah,
happened. So I mean, just you were given that opportunity because you got
yeah,
out. You seen the opportunity, you took it. But I mean, there's a lot of guys that end up dying or going to prison, man. I mean, like the guy we talked about today, Charles. He's still in there,
yeah.
still
He's gonna
alive.
he's gonna die in there. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of the hitmen that we've talked about. They've died of cancer in prison. I mean,
right,
there's just some kind of miserable death for
right.
whether it's karma or not, man. Whether it's coincidence or not, there's just something
Yeah,
about it. But
you get what you give. That's it.
yeah. Now we're switching over to our last clip. In this clip, Sal shares his relationship with Tony Roach. Tony Roach was a member of Gotti's crew. So without further ado, let's get into this last clip. Sal got a story about when he went and did a hijacking, and Tony Roach was there, and he was helping gather all the stolen merchandise. So Sal, walk us on to that heist that you went through when Tony Roach was there.
I don't. I think we did two truck hijackings that were suits, and then when Foxy got the truck, to the building, we called it the drop. I'd take the drivers for a ride to hold them for an hour, 2 hours, so they could unload the merchandise. After that, after I dropped the drivers off, I would go meet everybody at the drop, and there was Foxy was there, and Charlie Fatico was there, and I believe Tony Roach 2 or 3 times was one of the guys that unloaded. So that was sort of his function, is to support the guys that had done the hijackings. I don't think that Roach was doing any hijackings. I think he had other stuff that he was, focused on doing, and he was strictly a guy who unloaded the merchandise, off the trucks and prepared it to move it out of that building when it was sold. I think he hung out with Willie Boy Johnson for quite a while because I'd seen them at the crap game together. Willie Boy liked to play craps. Tony Roach played craps, but he was a small bettor, $5 bettor. He didn't have any money. So he wasn't putting $50 down or $100 on a number or whatever. That's not what he did. I did think that he was always going to be loyal to John and Angelo, and that was his function. That was his connection to those guys.
Yeah, I would like you said. You mean with him being on this associate level as well? I mean, you were too, but you were doing these hijackings. So I guess maybe it was just the fact that he had other rackets going on. So I mean, he just went there to help out Gotti. So Gotti and Angelo, they must have asked him, "Hey, man, we gonna need help unloading this
Yeah,
truck." So can't really trust anyone else to do it, a
Right.
legit guy or anything. So,
Yeah.
you want to keep it on the down low. So you get some guy from the crew, and so happened to be Tony, tall, lengthy
Yeah.
guy, to
Yeah.
help out and do that. But I mean, to kind of follow up on that as well is like, with him helping out. I mean, did he ever get any of the merchandise? Did he ever get any? Like Gotti came in and got the suits, from you and Tommy. I mean, do you recall him saying anything to you?
I just don't remember. I mean, I was so busy. It was like, okay, we got the truck, we dropped off the merchandise. Somebody sold it, we got our money, we moved on. And Foxy and I were always looking for another score. We didn't ask him to get involved in the hijackings we did. As far as I knew, his function was really just, to hang around Angelo and John. I didn't even know if he was interested, in being a heist guy. But I wasn't surprised to learn years later that he was part of, the Castellano assassination, or the disappearance of the guy Favara, I think his name was, who accidentally killed Gotti's kid.
Yeah.
He would. I'm sure he would do anything he could. If John Gotti asked him to do something, he did it.
So I mean, always got that kind of vibe from him, just from the beginning. I mean, he
Right.
just seemed like he was, entrenched with Gotti. Did he
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe if you ever talked to him or anything about saying anything about Gotti and how he was loyal to him or how much he loved him.
No, he was totally committed to John. You could never say a word. I could
Oh.
tell. You could never say a word negative about John. I think Angelo always had conflict with Roach because maybe he didn't trust him because he was a former drug addict. That was always a bad piece of history to carry with you, that you use drugs,
Yeah, I mean that would be a very big deal, especially I mean you get you watch the movies, you see even in reported history guys that are on drugs and they need their next fix or whatnot. They need their money, so what the
Right.
feds approach them. Hey man,
Yeah.
we'll get you some money if you cooperate with us, and
Right.
that's what they fear. So
Yeah.
whether that never did end up becoming the case with Tony, though. I mean,
No, he was loyal to the end. I believe. I mean,
Yeah.
I read a little bit about. I think law enforcement tried to get him to flip,
Yeah.
and I don't think he did. So
No, he didn't. I mean, or else he would have got out a lot earlier. He never did get out, but he would have gone out at some point.
Yeah.
But even when he tried to get out, they really didn't want to let him out at all.
Yeah.
I mean, they said he might not be able to do hijackings, but he could still
Yeah.
conspire to do it.
The way I read it was he died a miserable death, had a heart condition, and just died in the hospital. 71 years old. He never lived a glamorous life. He just was involved with a guy who was a rising star. Gotti became this rising star. And if you listen to Sammy, I never did listen to Sammy. I did listen this week to about his explanation of who John Gotti became at the end. So he really did evolve into a different kind of a personality, Gotti.
Yeah, and by the time, what year did he become boss? Do you recall?
85.
So then Tony would have been busted in 87. So Tony would have been up there for at least 2 years before he was busted, right?
Yeah.
With
Oh, yeah.
Gotti. So I mean, he had to have had at least 2 years of glamour. I don't know, mob glamour, whatever they call it, man. I don't know, but it wasn't anything compared to the
Right.
the life sentence he got and dying in there like that. So
Yeah.
you think to yourself, I mean, I wonder if you ask him at the end of his life, like, do you have any regrets or how would you have done anything different? I wonder if he would have a change of mind, change of heart by then.
Yeah.
I don't know, because he never did come out and cooperate though.
Yeah, I think he was just an unfortunate guy that had nowhere to go and got involved in crime and couldn't get away from it. That was an example of how people get sucked into that life.
Yeah, I mean, what about like with the heist that you did when Tony was there? To expand a little bit on it, as well as that he was just there to help put it away and stuff. But like, I mean, with that heist, you said it was a coat heist, so I mean, you drove the guys around What
It was men's suit. We got a whole truckload of men's suits, so it was more like he was a lackey, just a guy that hung around, made a few bucks, helping do the dirty work for the whole Gotti crew. And he answered to Charlie Fatico and Danny Fatico, the two brothers. And then Gotti, sort of, he had a soft spot for him because he was a former drug addict.
right? And that's usually a lot of mob guys. It seems like they don't even want to get involved with drug addicts or guys like that. I mean, you see, I mean, obviously we did our shows on Henry and stuff as well.
Yeah.
He could have never been made, but there was reasons like Poliverio, he had turned on him. He's not
Right.
flipped, but he just didn't want to have nothing to do with him because he was doing drugs and selling it as well.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I don't know. I mean, there was guys that you said you didn't really want to get involved with, like Henry,
No,
Tony. You
because
didn't really know.
you always thought you couldn't trust them.
Yeah. I mean, did you have any examples or see anything in the past of guys flipping that were drug addicts or?
Not that I knew of. I mean, down the road, we'll do a segment on a couple of drug addicts who ripped off a made guy's house, and Foxy and I were accused of it. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what these drug addicts meant to the mob, because the mob always figured they could use these guys. Again, they could use them, but they were very leery about trusting guys like Roach. I mean, but he did stand up. So
Yeah, that's true. So I mean, it's just common knowledge. Just stay away from them.
yeah,
But like you said, they would take advantage of them if they wanted. But at the same time, you take
Yeah.
advantage, they might flip.
yeah,
You
they
know what I
were they were in the street. They were like the lower level of the mob guys. They were in the street. They always came across good information. Other guys that were stealing stuff. They were
Yeah.
street thieves.
No,
So-
I know. I would imagine so. But I just want to let everyone know that we appreciate everybody supporting our Patreon channel, and this is an exclusive video as well. Like I said in the beginning, we just want to continue to give you guys some exclusive videos, so
Right.
you can get some untold stories that aren't going to be told on YouTube, or YouTube might take down. So you guys get to hear it. And I mean, if you guys have any other questions or comments, you can comment on this video. You can text us on our Patreon chat and just let us know if you have questions, topics, any new ideas, or want to hear anything different. Just let us know, and me and Sal will be more than happy to get back to you. You got anything?
Yeah.
to add in?
In closing on Roach, I thought about how pathetic it was, the life that he lived. So maybe that's an example to others. Get involved in drugs, and then you have no choice but to continue in drugs and crime. So he died a miserable death, and gosh, that's a terrible way to go.
It definitely is. And that's, again, another way to these stories. I think they need to be heard so people can understand, hey, I mean, look what this guy went through. He
Yeah.
got so deep into it, and he ended up doing life in prison for what? You know what I mean? Just, he should have never been involved with selling drugs, none of that. He could have maybe have been an athlete, you know what I mean? If he would have been different area, different, guys around him, who knows? Life could have been different.
Nothing glamorous about being around John Gotti for his life, Roach's life. It was all turned out negative, and that's an example of who supported a guy like Gotti.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. We made the best with what we had. It is very important for us to stay consistent for you all and keep you all happy. Please comment any key takeaways that you got from this interview. Please share it with anyone that you think will enjoy this type of content. Also, please be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel to get more exclusive videos from me and Sal. And of course, if you want to get more videos like you got to see today, please subscribe to our Patreon channel for exclusive videos that we don't put on here. But in this case, we did, because we didn't get to record our weekly episode. At the end of this video, a playlist will pop up of all of our other interviews we did in the past called A Lifetime of Mafia Tales. We got about 40 episodes on there now. And if you enjoyed this podcast, I know you'll enjoy my other podcast called the Invest in Yourself podcast. On that podcast, I interview people that are former drug dealers, former mobsters, former criminals, former gangsters, all kinds of different people from different kinds of walks of life. And if you want to access that podcast, you can look it up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, of course, and look up the Invest in Yourself podcast. You can also also easily access this if you're watching it on YouTube. You can just click the YouTube channel, go to the playlist tab, and click the Invest in Yourself podcast. I got a lot on there. Thank you again so much for watching today's episode, and of course, we'll see you on the next one. If you would like to support our podcast, we got a few items that you can purchase. All of these items can be found in the video description below. The first one is Sal's book, The Sinatra Club. You can get this personally autographed by Sal. The next one and our hottest seller is the 1972 Sinatra Club playing cards. Back in Sal's Mafia days, he opened up his own social club named the Sinatra Club. Many mobsters would come to this club, even when there were all-out wars going on between different families. They would come to the Sinatra Club and play cards. Some of the mobsters that played with these cards were John Gotti, Dominic Cataldo, Tommy DeSimone, Foxy, Jimmy Burke, Willie Boy Johnson, Tony Roach, Henry Hill, Joe DeFede, Danny Fatico, Gene Gotti, Peter Gotti, Joey Scopo, and many more. We're selling each one of these cards for $10 a piece. These cards are limited, we only got 1,000 of them. The next item is an autographed picture of Sal from his Mafia days. Another item is the Dinner with the Mobster card. You can get this autographed as well. This was an event that Sal had hosted in the past. We also got the Ubats production ticket from an event that Sal had hosted. This is also autographed. The last item we got to offer is Sal's book, The Sins of the Father. Again, you can find all these items in the video description below.